Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Hong Kong Horror. Simon here. Let me ask you something. Do you enjoy going to the cinema? It's something most of us do without thinking twice. For most of us, it's a mini escape from real life as we catch the latest movie release. Maybe relax for a few hours. But what if I told you that movie theaters are actually known to be among some of the more haunted places you can visit? Think about it. They're usually dark, enclosed, and sometimes built in places with heavy history. They're magnets for yin energy. Have you ever experienced anything strange while you were catching a new movie? Or have you just been lucky enough not to notice who was sitting with you in the dark? In Hong Kong, if you sit down with the older generation, you might hear them say something a little strange. If you go to the movies, don't sit in the front rows. Those seats aren't for you. They're for wandering spirits. Now, that might sound like superstition or just old wives' tales, but by the end of tonight's episode, you'll understand why people say that. This next story was shared by a woman from Hong Kong. Let's call her Sarah. Now, Sarah isn't like most people. She has yin-yang eyes, the third eye. In other words, ever since she was a child, she's been able to see things that most of us can't. Beings that don't quite belong in our world anymore. By now, she's used to it. It's just a part of her life. But this particular incident, this one, shook her enough for her to remember every single detail, even after all these years. It happened to her many years ago, during the peak of Hungry Ghost Festival, when, according to tradition, the gates of the underworld are wide open and wandering spirits are free to roam among the living. What happened that night involved Sarah and several of her friends. So go ahead, turn down the lights, get comfortable, and let's dive right into Sarah's story. And as always, once we're done, we'll break everything down from a Chinese cultural perspective to see if we can figure out exactly what happened here to Sarah. Also, I try my best to answer everyone's comments, but I apologize if I'm unable to get to all of them in time, as some of them do fall through the cracks, or they get buried in my notifications. So if you see any questions from fellow viewers that you know the answer to, definitely feel free to respond and help each other out. Alright, so on this particular night, Sarah and 5 of her friends decided to meet up after work. So including her, there were 6 of them in total. It had been one of those exhausting weeks of crazy deadlines, long commutes, and the usual BS office politics. By Friday night, all they wanted to do was to switch their brain off and do something fun. Now, it just so happened to be the peak of Hungry Ghost Festival, the 7th lunar month, the time when older generations in Hong Kong tend to head home early, avoid unnecessary night outings, and definitely don't go looking for trouble. But Sarah and her friends were younger. Most of her friends didn't really buy into the whole supernatural stuff. As far as they were concerned, ghosts belonged in movies, not real life. And Sarah? She never told them about her yin-yang, her yin-yang eyes, about the things she's been seeing her whole life. It was just easier that way. So, they shrugged off the warnings. Screw it, someone said. It's been a rough week. We deserve this. They decided on a midnight screening of a brand new horror film playing in one of Hong Kong's older districts. When they arrived, there were people in the building, but not many. For a Friday night, it felt unusually quiet. The kind of quiet that settles in during Ghost Month, when most people would rather stay home than wander the city after dark. Sarah's friends loved it. They practically had the whole theater to themselves. None of them had any idea that the real horror wouldn't be coming from the screen. Among Sarah's group of friends that night was Jerry. A few weeks earlier, he had fractured his ankle during a soccer match. Now he was stuck on crutches, moving slower than everyone else. The rest of the group naturally drifted toward the escalators that led up to the ticketing level. But Jerry couldn't take the escalator. He had to take the accessibility elevator tucked off to the side. Sarah glanced at him, then at the others. "I'll go with him," she said. The others waved, and they stepped onto the escalator, rising slowly upward. "Meet you slowpokes at the top," someone yelled out. Jerry grinned and adjusted his crutches. "Don't go sit down without us," he choked. The elevator doors stood closed in front of them. He pressed the button, and they waited. Ding! The metal doors slid open slowly. Jerry adjusted himself, getting ready to hop on with his crutches. Sarah stood behind him, but as he stepped into the lift, she glanced up, about to follow him, and immediately froze. The elevator wasn't empty. Standing inside were 3 men. They weren't staff, and they certainly weren't moviegoers. They were dressed in strange clothing, long, heavy robes, the kind you only see in Chinese history books or period dramas. The top of their heads were shaved clean, and from the back of their heads hung long, thick braids in the Qing Dynasty style. But it wasn't their hair that made Sarah freeze. It was their necks. Their heads didn't sit properly on their shoulders. Each one was tilted at a sickening, unnatural angle, twisted and hanging loosely, as if the bones inside had been completely shattered. The 3 men simply stood there, staring straight ahead, as if they didn't even notice Jerry standing right in front of them. They didn't move. They didn't step out of the lift. Jerry couldn't see them at all. He stood inside the elevator, directly in front of these men, and looked back at Sarah. "Yo, Sarah, you coming or what?" he said casually. Jerry, how about we watch the movie another night?" Sarah blurted out. "What? What are you talking about, Sarah? We're already here. Come on, let's go," Jerry replied. Not wanting to ruin the mood or draw more attention, Sarah forced herself to step into the elevator beside Jerry, pretending she couldn't see the entities standing just behind them. She stayed close to Jerry as the doors closed and the elevator began moving upward. The ride felt like it lasted forever. In the blurry reflection of the metal doors, Sarah could see that one of the figures was slowly getting closer to her. She didn't dare turn around. Instead, she shut her eyes tightly, trying not to look at it anymore. Finally, the elevator reached their floor. The doors opened, and Sarah stepped out quickly, almost before Jerry could react. She ran straight over to the rest of her friends, who were standing in a circle, laughing and joking as they waited for her and Jerry, completely unaware of what had just shared the elevator with them. "Hurry up, you two," her friends called out as they spotted them arriving. "The movie's starting. Let's just get inside." They were right. If they didn't move now, they'd miss the opening scenes. Sarah didn't have a chance to tell them what she had just seen in the elevator, and she wasn't exactly sure she wanted to tell them. They all rushed forward, handing their ticket to the ticket collector standing outside the theater. Sarah remembers it vividly. It was theater number 7. Honestly, all she wanted to do was go home at this point. Even though she sees ghosts throughout her life, these 3 in the elevator had been different. They weren't faint, transparent figures that blurred at the edges. They were extremely solid. But she didn't want to be a killjoy. She told herself everything would be fine now, and assumed that was the last she'd see of these 3 entities. The 6 of them sat together in a row near the back. There was an empty seat at the far end of the row, the aisle seat. For now, they decided to use it as a spot to pile their handbags and jackets, thinking that they could just remove their things if someone claimed it later. After all, the theater was mostly empty. There were a few scattered patrons here and there, but for the most part, it was quiet. Sarah took the seat closest to the aisle, right beside their stack of belongings. The lights dimmed, and the movie started. but the horror wasn't on the screen. As Sarah tried to settle in and get into the movie, she caught movement out of the corner of her eye to her right. She glanced at the aisle seat, the one they had been using for their bags. It wasn't empty anymore. Sitting there, in the dark, on top of their jackets and handbags, was a person. In the flickering light of the movie screen, Sarah couldn't make out a face. It was just a blur of gray static. The features, impossible to distinguish clearly, but she saw the back of the head. The long, distinct black braid of the Qing dynasty rested against the back of the aisle seat. One of the men from the elevator. Sarah froze in terror. She tried to look forward, to pretend she hadn't seen him. Growing up in Hong Kong, everyone knew the rules. Her grandmother had drilled it into her head. If you ever see something you're not supposed to see, pretend you didn't. It was a rule Sarah had lived by her whole life, especially with her Yamyanghan, and so far, it's always worked out well for her. Suddenly, her friend to her left nudged her sharply. "Sarah, why are you laughing so hard?" The friend hissed, whispering aggressively. "Stop it, you're annoying everyone." Sarah turned slowly. "I'm not laughing," she whispered back, her voice trembling. They both looked toward the end of the row. The laughter was coming from the aisle seat. The chair was vibrating, rocking violently against the floorbolts, as if the thing sitting there was laughing. It wasn't just them. A girl and her boyfriend in the row directly in front of Sarah's group suddenly turned around. The girl didn't look at Sarah. Her wide, panicked eyes were fixed on the empty seat at the end of the row. Sarah felt a chill. It was clear this girl could see something too. Maybe she was like Sarah and had Yamyang on. She turned quickly and whispered in her boyfriend's ear. Within seconds, they left the theater. In that moment of sheer terror, Sarah made a fatal mistake. She looked directly at the figure. Eye contact. The instant she realized what she did, she looked away, but something strange happened. When she looked up again, the theater had changed. Even in the dim light, she could tell it wasn't the same. The room looked older, like a cinema from decades past, and it was full. Every single seat was occupied. Sarah hadn't seen anyone enter, yet somehow the theater was now packed. But the people, they looked off. Their clothes didn't belong in this era. It was as if she had been transported to a Hong Kong cinema back from the 60s or 70s. She couldn't take it anymore. Heart pounding, she stood up and ran out into the lobby. The air felt instantly lighter. She bent over, hands on her knees, trying to catch her breath. The staff outside, the same one who had been collecting tickets, noticed her. "Are you alright?" he asked. "Yeah," Sarah said. "There's just too much people in there. I needed to get out." The staff frowned, confused. Ma'am? This showing's barely got anyone in it tonight." Sarah looked back into the theater. He was right. Aside from her friends and a few scattered strangers, the room was almost empty. All of the people that she saw in there just a few seconds ago were now nowhere to be found. She could see from outside that her friends were now gathering their things, looking concerned. She felt awful. She didn't want to ruin the night for everyone. "You see them too, huh?" the staff said, leaning casually against the wall. "Sorry?" Sarah asked, startled. "The other guests. You can see them too. I thought I was the only one. Sometimes, they don't want to be seen. They're here a lot of the time. Just pretend you don't see them. And don't walk against the walls. They like to stick to the edges when they move around." Before Sarah could respond, her friends came out into the lobby, grabbing their jackets and bags. "Sarah, are you okay?" they asked. "Jerry told us you weren't feeling well earlier and wanted to go home. You should have just told us. Come on, let's go. The movie sucked anyway. That night, Sarah burned a fever. She was sick for the next 3 days, barely able to get out of bed. But after it passed, everything returned back to normal. After this incident, Sarah never stayed out late again during Hungry Ghost Festival. So, Hong Kong Horror family, what exactly happened here on this night at the movies for Sarah? Please, pause the video here and let us know what you think in the comments below. Alright, so what do I think happened here in Sarah's experience? There's a lot to take away from this one. The first is the time period in when this happened. Sarah mentioned that this occurred during Hungry Ghost Month. During this time, there are usually spikes in reports of paranormal incidents, such as Sarah's, and for good reason. This holiday is a pretty big deal in our culture. During this month, it's traditionally believed that the gates of the underworld are open, allowing spirits of the deceased to leave the underworld and wander freely in the living world until the end of this holiday. This is a time when boundaries between yin, the world of the dead, and yang, the world of the living, are at their thinnest. Because of this, paranormal activity is said to spike, and locations that are usually mundane, like alleyways, old buildings, and yes, movie theaters, can become hotspots for supernatural encounters. This involves not just restless or wandering spirits, but also ancestral ghosts seeking offerings, vengeful ghosts, or those who died tragically. The older generation in Hong Kong treats this period with extreme caution. Many will avoid traveling at night, refrain from swimming, and even delay major life decisions. The reasoning is both practical and spiritual. Since wandering spirits are believed to be everywhere at this time, the risk of encountering something malevolent or being drawn by a spirit is higher. For Sarah and her friends, who were young and skeptical, their choice to go out during the peak of Ghost Month placed them directly in the path of active spiritual energy. Her Yum-Yang-An, yin-yang eyes, made her especially sensitive to this energy, allowing her to perceive things the others couldn't, like the 3 Qin Dynasty men in the elevator, the occupied aisle seat, and the temporary vision of the Full House theater. Next, I want to touch on why movie theaters are often considered hotspots for spirits in Asia. As I've mentioned earlier, theaters are usually very dark and enclosed. There's no windows, so to ghosts, this is like a 5-star hotel. It's the type of environment they prefer to gather to hide and rest. Also, you have to keep in mind, Chinese culture has a long history of entertaining the dead through ghost operas. During the Hungry Ghost Festival, we built massive bamboo theaters for Chinese opera, where the entire front row is left empty for the VIPs of the underworld. If a human sits there, they will be plagued with bad luck, because they're most likely sitting on a ghost's lap. This tradition has bled into modern cinema culture. Ghosts also retain the habits they had when they were alive. If they loved going to the movies, as humans, they still crave it as spirits. They are drawn to that strong emotion in the room. Your fear, your laughter, your sadness. They feed off that energy. In traditional Cantonese opera and older cinemas, front row seats or specific aisle seats were often left empty intentionally. These are pretty much reserved for the wandering spirits, so they could enjoy the show peacefully. By piling their jackets and bags onto that seat, Sarah's group essentially treated a spirit's reserved seat as a luggage rack. This is viewed as a direct sign of disrespect, inviting the spirit to make its presence known. So, what about the 3 men that Sarah saw in the elevator? Who were they? Were they just visiting from the underworld during Hungry Ghost Month? Or were they here this whole time? All great questions. It's hard to say, but based on the details, I would lean toward these spirits being bound here and not just visiting. I personally would classify them as day-boggling, earthbound spirits, for a few reasons. Sarah mentioned that this theater was located in an older district in Hong Kong. Many of these older districts, like Seongwang or Sai Ying-pun, were sites of early colonial settlements, or even execution grounds. If a modern cinema is built on top of an old execution ground or mass grave, the spirits don't just leave because the building changes. They're tethered to the earth. Elevators often act as conduits. They move vertically through the layers of the building, piercing the earth. I think that these three men most likely died on this patch of land in the past. The elevator shaft cuts through the land where they died, so it's passing through their space. Elevator shafts also act like deep wells. It pierces the earth and creates a direct tunnel upward and downward to the underworld. Sarah also mentioned that these men were dressed in very old-style clothing and had a classic Qing Dynasty-style braid. This meant that these ghosts were extremely old. Lo Guai. This isn't a recently deceased person who's confused. This is a spirit that's been dead for over 100 years. Their resentment, or yunhei, has had a century to marinate and solidify. They're often viewed as more powerful and harder to banish than modern spirits. I think they were most likely killed by hanging on this property in the past. Sarah noticed that all of their necks were bent and looked broken. Public executions, often by beheading or strangulation, were common in the Qin Dynasty legal system for serious crimes. And as many of you know by now, spirits who die violently often get trapped in the trauma of their final moments. The fact that they were all standing still, staring blankly with broken necks, suggests to me that they were trapped in a residual haunting, a recording of their pain playing on a loop. So what about the part when Sarah made eye contact with the ghost, and all of a sudden, she saw the theater change? Why did that happen? And why did she see all those people that seemed to appear out of nowhere? I think this was a result of a few different factors. Since it was peak ghost festival, the veil between the living and the dead were already extremely thin. That, combined with the yin-heavy movie theater, which amplifies the power of the spirits inside, and the fact that Sarah has yumyang on, was the perfect recipe for disaster. This was a full temporal overlap between the two worlds. In the right conditions, ghosts can project environments or scenes familiar to them, creating a layered reality. This isn't hallucination. It's a cultural belief that spirits can temporarily alter the perception of space, especially for someone with yamyang. I think the ghost was not necessarily malevolent, but just curious or bored, and he wanted to show Sarah things from his perspective, something that he's either experienced before in his own lifetime, or something that he wishes he could have experienced before he died. This type of vivid, immersive manifestation is usually only perceivable to those with spiritual sensitivity, like Sarah. For most people, like our friends, the world remained normal because their yang energy effectively shields them from yin projections. Sarah's eye contact acted like a trigger, allowing the spirit to fully project himself and manipulate the environment in her perception. This is consistent with Chinese belief that ghosts cannot impose themselves fully on the living unless the living acknowledge them in some way, often by direct attention or fear, which is one reason why elders will often tell you to never look at them if you can see them. And what about what the staff told Sarah? It seemed like this gentleman, like Sarah, has some type of sensitivity. He too is able to see them to some degree. He mentioned something very interesting. He told her not to walk close to the walls because the spirits prefer to move around close to the edge of the walls. This is actually true in Chinese metaphysics. A path where people walk is divided by energy flow. The center is yang. The middle of the corridor, hallway, or street is where human traffic is heaviest. It's where sunlight hits and where air moves fastest. This creates a strong current of yunhei, yang energy. Spirits being made of yunhei, yin energy, find this energy abrasive, hot, and overwhelming. The edges, on the other hand, the corners and the areas flush against the wall, are where the air is stagnant, shadows gather, and the temperature is cooler. This is the yin zone. This is why ghosts prefer to walk on the sides of a path, by the edges. Also, spirits are often described as having a magnetic or sticky quality to them, because they lack a physical body. They're being drawn to the structural stability of the walls and corners to anchor themselves, so they don't get blown away by the wind or strong yang energy. Elders will often scold children for walking against walls or alleyways in old buildings at night. They say, walk in the middle, you might bump into a spirit. If you walk against a wall where a spirit is resting, you're essentially pressing your body against theirs, which leads to a direct transfer of yin energy and potential spiritual attachment. In Chinese metaphysics, this physical overlap between the living and the dead results in a few very specific terrifying consequences, such as yin energy transfer, where your yang energy is sapped and their yin energy seeps directly into your bones. This is that deep chill that you hear people say they feel sometimes. By pressing or bumping into them, they may also get offended and cling to you. They can literally latch onto your back and ride you like a vehicle. So in short, try not to walk against the wall in yin-heavy places and stay in the center lane where most people walk. Thanks so much, Hong Kong Horror family, for making it all the way to this point of the video. I hope you enjoyed tonight's episode, which ended up being a little bit longer than usual. Until we speak again next week, stay safe and good night.